Happy Thanksgiving, Dog Nation. Welcome into this edition of DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. Trust you had a great day yesterday. Trust you're getting ready for a great day today. It's a little bit weird, and I know the team itself has been talking a lot about, okay, with the Friday game, that means Tuesday is Wednesday, and that means, all of that. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback coming in here. Let's see what's going on there with that. That's actually my fault. That's on my phone. It's different for all of us, but certainly for me today, regular show on a Friday, rolling right into a game day after that. So we're obviously getting excited about all of that. I'm hearing something coming through here. I don't know where that's coming from, but anyway, looking forward to a great time here today. Obviously broadcasting from home. We are going to knock the show out, get ready to get into Athens. Many of you already there starting your tailgate. I don't know how many times we've had an experience like this where doing an edition of DawgNation Daily while some fans may be watching it from their game day tailgate, obviously taking advantage of the warmer weather now for what's going to be much, much colder later on. But I know that DawgNation is going to have its game face on, and it's going to be ready for an incredible game coming up tonight. And obviously, we'll have full game day coverage of that. That means Kaylee coming up later on with her game day pregame show. I'll see you tonight from the UGA bookstore for our DawgNation postgame show. So we're going to have all of that on tap with you. So let's get in here and get some comments, as we always do, and then we'll see what else is going on here. Atlanta Boy 88 says the last time Georgia played on a Friday was a bowl game years ago. Yeah, I think now, and I'm sort of a nerd about some of this kind of stuff, I think now Georgia has played on every day of the week. Some people know this better than I do. I think that's the case. Now, I also remember when I was younger, teenager, Georgia and Georgia Tech played on Friday a couple of times then. The 1995 game, this is the one where Hines Ward was the quarterback. That game was actually on Thanksgiving Day. And of course, my dad's generation, certainly my grandfather's generation, remembers the old freshman game that took place, for many, many years at Bobby Dodd Stadium to benefit. Was it Scottish Rite that benefited? I apologize for not knowing, but raising a bunch of money for charity every single year, and a big deal where in kind of the era prior to freshman eligibility, you'd have I think 40,000 people at Bobby Dodd Stadium. The game was always in Atlanta. Just to sort of watch the Georgia and Georgia Tech freshmen play. And so there's a little bit of a history here for this game not always being on Saturday. I think 93 and 94, it may have been on Friday. And then, as I said before, Thanksgiving Day in 1995, that game was obviously on that Thursday. Alex Lundeen checking in to say, leaving a few hours to tailgate. Yeah, I said before, it's one of those kind of weird days where a lot of y'all doing this with me on kind of a regular Friday and then rolling into a game day. So we're kind of combining both games into one, but we think we're going to have a really fun time with a great show here today. Over here on DawgNation.com, Randy Hall celebrating the fact that Georgia also gets a recruiting win yesterday with Dennis Ozuchukwu, who does commit to Georgia yesterday. So we'll talk to Jeff Sentell about that here coming up in a moment. And all of the other UGA recruiting news. Don't forget, Jeff had a chance last week to watch Talon Taylor, the very outstanding wide receiver, play in person. So Jeff will give us some more on that coming up in a moment. Jack Fullerton on the subject of injuries. We are going to talk about that a little bit. Obviously, there's some curiosity from some fans about whether or not a Roderick Robinson or a Branson Robinson could get into today's game. I guess the official designation for both those guys right now is questionable. And we'll see. Remember, there is one more injury report that comes out right prior to game time. And the truth is that's probably the one that counts, I guess. So we could see a change in status for either the Robinsons. I know we're going to talk Georgia running backs here in a moment to begin the show. I know that Roderick Robinson's put some stuff out on social media that makes it sound like he might be close to, getting ready to come back here. So obviously, whether it's this game against Tech or maybe the SEC championship next Saturday, it seems like we're getting a little closer to all of that. Wyatt Fielden asking if I'm a fan of the cold weather. I am definitely not in any way, form, or fashion. My blood is more made for the Caribbean, Royal Caribbean cruises, than it is 30 whatever degrees in Athens here today. But you know what? We're going to get ready to enjoy it all. Justin F. asking about the score today. The truth is, I'm pretty confident in Georgia in this spot. I think that Georgia, whether it be not really having a history of looking past Tech and the era in which they've played the Jackets while also going to the SEC championship game. I think the chance to be at home today kind of gives you a lot here. And listen, the one thing that obviously I think has energized some Tech fans is the fact that Brent Key has been, pretty good in these kinds of games in which, Tech is a fairly large underdog. Key in his era as Georgia Tech coach, Jackets have actually, fared pretty well in those types of games. But I don't expect that to be true today. I'm actually pretty confident what I think that Georgia's going to be able to do. That's kind of my thought there on that. Johnny Prescott asking about a Thanksgiving sandwich for lunch. Yeah, I'm excited about that. My wife actually made a nice breakfast for us a little earlier, and I'm going to hang out here at home for a minute and have some Thanksgiving leftovers that my mom cooked last night before going over to Athens in a bit. So it is a very, very good day anytime you're getting the chance to do that. DT on the subject of Rod Robinson looking good to go in Cody's video from earlier this week. Yeah, I mean, obviously seems like he's running better now. And, let's just be completely frank here. Some of this comes down to, does Georgia think that it needs him today? Can they afford to hold him out one more week? Or, if he's chomping the bit, maybe you do turn him loose. Obviously, last year, Georgia held out a couple of guys against Tech, and that game ended up, being closer than experts thought it would be. So, perhaps that also lingers as a part of that thought process here too. Jim Blair checking in from Worth County, Georgia. Jim, we're glad you're here today. Ira Brashad also checking in from Texas, so it's great to see all of that. Thomas T-Bone 86 asked about Go With The Flow. Yeah, we still have Go With The Flow today. So it's going to start at noon, and we're going to do, as a part of our R.S. Andrews cooldown here in a little bit, we'll also give you a pick there for one of the big games of the weekend. We'll pick South Carolina Clemson as a part of the R.S. Andrews cooldown at the end of this show. But yeah, at noon and then on demand anytime after that, we'll still have Go With The Flow. So that's exactly right. Mark Day asking about Justice Terry. We're going to talk to Jeff about Terry in a moment. Terry obviously visits Auburn this past weekend. There's been some chatter coming off of that. You never know how real that is. Obviously, you're kind of counting down to early December, which is just a few days from now, when Terry ultimately makes his decision. So latest on Justice Terry, Mark, I'll make sure to ask Jeff Sentell, our DawgNation recruiting insider, when he joins us here live on the show once it begins in just a couple of minutes. Let's see what else. Randy Hall asked me if I got my fourth quarter mentality. You better believe that I do. I'm excited about this. What I believe will probably end up being the last home game of the year for Georgia. Obviously, there is some chance they could host a home playoff game, but if Georgia wins the SEC championship, that becomes, kind of a moot point. So this is a great day to go out on a big note to conclude the regular season slate for Georgia here, perhaps the final home game here. And I got the impression from just talking to some Georgia fans the last few days, they're going to be fired up and ready to make this a great, great experience. Steve Truss, in fact, checking in to say this game is going to be epic. So Georgia fans clearly got their minds right as we get ready for all of this. PJ Boyle, did I say that right? Says, wonder if we see Trevor back. I would say that right now, ETN is probably lagging behind. And some of y'all can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I believe I'm right about this. I think that ETN's probably lagging behind Roderick and Branson Robinson right now. It seems like ETN's getting a little bit better. But if one of these running backs sort of magically plays today, I'm guessing it's far more likely to be one of the Robinsons than it is to be Trevor Etienne. Wyatt Fielding, though, says maybe the Etienne comes back next week. Maybe that is the case. Bill Sanders also pointing out that early signing day is essentially here. That's right. Next week it starts. I think Terry's making his decision on Friday. Is that right? Friday, kind of the conclusion of that early period. So there is a lot going on here for sure. Johnny Prescott says there's a rumor there could be some brown liquor consumed in today's cold air. There could very well be the case. Y'all just be careful. But definitely a very, if you know what I'm saying, spirited crowd here tonight. You're expecting that from Georgia fans to be sure. All right, so I'm at home. We're kind of in the process of getting decorated for Christmas here. Not fully decorated as of yet, but we're getting there. Ready for a great day. So let's fire up the animation. We'll tell you everything that's going to happen on today's program. Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. I think Jim Blair, watching on Facebook, speaks for everybody. He says he's still full right now after 2 helpings of turkey and potatoes and pecan pie yesterday. Many of us feeling the same way. Many of us enjoying those leftovers here today. But there is also a lot of energy in the space here too, because while it's a Friday show for us, it also rolls into a game day. That means I'm at home today. Just didn't want to go into the studio and then come back and come to Athens. That ends up being kind of a lot of driving for one day. So I am at home. We're going to knock out this show and give you a great one. Then I'm getting dressed and getting over there, ready to be between the hedges for a renewal of the rivalry known as clean, old-fashioned hate. What a night it's going to be in Sanford Stadium here this evening, but a lot to take care of prior to that. It's a Friday. That still means Jeff Sentell. That means Georgia recruiting news with him. We're coming up on decision day for Justice Terry. The early signing period begins next week, so we're covering all of that. There's also a huge slate of rivalry games, some of those today, Egg Bowl, in addition to clean, old-fashioned hate. A lot of those tomorrow. We'll give you final thoughts on that. We'll explain why it seems like Georgia's process for getting ready for this rivalry game seems to be working out pretty well. They know the stakes, getting a chance to play this one at home. Georgia players saying all the right stuff. We'll give you that. But off the top, for two reasons, we're going to talk about Nate Frazier. Reason number one, I think that Frazier could play a gigantic role in today's game against Georgia Tech, as some of these other Georgia running backs also sort of work their way back to full health. But also, total transparency, Frazier has said something recently on social media that I just think is awesome, and I think it's absolutely the kind of the right tone to strike prior to the regular season finale here today and the postseason run for Georgia that's going to come up after that. I like this kind of thing, so we're going to have some fun with that and see if we can get you in a good mood here post-Thanksgiving with a big game on tap tonight. Let's get fired up and ready to go. We're glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
To some things, I'm a pretty easy mark in that I just, I'm very easily persuaded by certain things that some Georgia players perhaps say and do. I just really like certain things. I always appreciate when a Georgia player shows an appreciation for history, because the truth is, I'm like the rest of us, getting older all the time, and these players now are much, much younger than I am. And so while I have spent my life kind of loving Georgia football and chronicling the various eras of Georgia football. In fact, in a day like this, we probably end up thinking more about that because many of us can remember every Georgia Tech game we ever went to. And, the first ones and how it kind of shaped our feeling of this rivalry. The other rivalries kind of the same way, that if you're like me and you kind of been around for a little while, like eventually, that history that's kind of shaped you becomes the way in which you kind of think about Georgia football. But we are also smart enough to know that for the 18, 19, 20-year-old kids that are playing for Georgia football, their experience with that history is not the same. They're much younger. Maybe they came from far away, that they perhaps don't look at Georgia football and think about it as this legacy, this collection of eras, this long list of history. They only think about it in the present tense because that's all they've really been alive to experience. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just sort of the way that things are. But when you do have a player that seems to have that little bit of appreciation for, the history of all of this, and as I mentioned a moment ago, I'm a pretty easy mark when it comes to stuff like that. So there was a post this week that Georgia running back Nate Frazier put up. I saw it on the X platform, and maybe he put it everywhere. I happened to see it on X. He puts it up there, and boy, this really strikes a lot of the right notes for me. So Frazier shares a couple of photos. The caption says, "When it's all said and done, I want my name to be up with these greats right here, hashtag DGD." Well, listen, you see the photo of Frazier walking off the field with the great Dogs win graphic flashed on the big stadium board. And I think all of us would say that right now Frazier is on his way to putting the sort of DGD-like career together for UGA. There's a lot to like about Nate Frazier here in his first year at Georgia. And he also shares this really cool montage, and I apologize for not knowing who the artist that puts this together is, but it's a really cool montage, kind of a painting almost of, you see Sony Michel, you see Todd Gurley, you see Sean Marino, you see Nick Chubb, you see Frazier himself kind of right there in the middle of that to go along with DeAndre Swift, and then Herschel Walker obviously occupying the largest space up there in the top left. Frazier saying, listen, I want to be here with these guys and sort of be a part, of what the great legacy of RBU is. And I'm sorry, y'all, that kind of thing just really, really works on me. The fact that Frazier knows who came before him, and he knows that when he totes the rock for Georgia here right now, he's doing that with, the legacy of a program that really, as that graphic showed you a moment ago, thinks of itself as RBU, running back university. And I think prior to tonight's game against Georgia Tech, a sentiment like that from Frazier, I think it carries a lot of weight because, A, we're coming off a week last week in which Frazier became the first running back this season to eclipse 100 yards for Georgia. So he clearly seems to be coming into his own the right way. Whatever fumble issue he had going back several weeks ago against Ole Miss, that seems to be deep in the past right now and not really a part of the relevant present tense conversation. And I think we would also say with Georgia against Georgia Tech tonight, looking where Georgia might be strong, the Georgia running game, I think, you got to imagine, is a big part of the overall game plan for the Dogs here tonight. The Georgia offensive line has played, I would say, its best football of the season as of late. And when you think about what Georgia has the opportunity to do after this, SEC championship next Saturday, possibility of being in the college football playoff after that, and all the things that could be on the way for Georgia, if Georgia can add the very, very potent, powerful running attack that almost seems like, even with some injuries, it's perhaps poised to kind of break out right now in a way that it maybe hasn't to this point in the season. All of a sudden you realize this Georgia offense gets a little harder to stop because you've got to consider what Carson Beck can do through the air, while also what Georgia might be able to do in terms of imposing its will on the ground. It really seems like one way or another, the Georgia rushing attack is about to be a very big part of the story moving forward for UGA. And last Saturday's game against UMass, even though it's obviously some of that, influenced by the opponent, that seems to be another example that kind of shows you just how true that is. In fact, with that in mind, Frazier saying, I'm ready to be a part of RBU. I'm ready to carry on this legacy. As Kirby Smart told you after last Saturday's game against UMass, there's a lot to like about the way that Nate Frazier's playing right now. And that game last week against the Minutemen, another example of that. This is what Kirby said after the game.
Confidence. He's still learning things. He still messes up, but he's electric. He's different when the ball hits his hands. He bursts in the hole. He probably sometimes too fast. He's not patient sometimes, but you talk about a kid that runs hard, works hard, and loves it. And those linemen love playing with him.
Don't you love that? Lyman loved playing with him. He's electric with the ball in his hand. And I think this day, probably in some respects, sort of belongs to him a bit. I expect him to get the most carries for Georgia today, and I expect, as I said before, when you look at where Georgia has a chance to be at its best against Tech tonight, imposing its will with the offensive line, getting some stuff on the ground, that just might be the recipe for victory here for Georgia. Now, this conversation around Nate Frazier also kind of bumps into a little bit about some growing optimism for Georgia fans that some of the other injured running backs could also be very close to returning too. At some point in time, you get Trevor Etienne perhaps back, although I don't expect that to be tonight. There's a little bit of chatter about what about Roderick Robinson? What about Branson Robinson? Two guys that I believe on the most recent availability report were listed as questionable. But the fact is, for one or both of those guys, that could change when the final availability report comes out a little bit later on today. That it seems like the night tonight probably belongs, I would think, to Frazier, that he'll be asked to carry the load, no pun intended, for Georgia when it comes to the running game. But there is also some chance, if you can get past Tech and if Frazier can kind of, sort of do his RBU thing tonight against Georgia Tech, that maybe for future games that you've got a whole lot more to go from with a very, much healthier stable of Georgia running backs at the time. So, Kirby Smart talked about that on Tuesday about kind of where things stand with ETN right now, where things stand with Rob, where things stand with Branson Robinson. And while, Frazier seems to be playing his best football, it could be sooner rather than later in some form or fashion, perhaps tonight, that Georgia gets some more of those running backs too. This is Smart on Tuesday night talking about that.
He's running well. He hit 21 miles an hour yesterday, which is really good for him. He looks good, but he hasn't been able to do anything with us. Rod has done practice, contact, has done taking reps. He's looked good out there. Branson has too. Branson's taken some. I didn't get to see the last part of practice to know how much Branson and Rod did. Early in practice, they did take some reps with the twos and rolled through there, just seeing where they are confidence level and where they are mentally. They've been kind of out of contact for a while, but both of them did practice and did some good things.
Sounds pretty hopeful to me. I don't know what it means for tonight necessarily, but it sounds like it could mean something here before this season is all said and done. And look, let me wrap up this conversation by sort of saying it this way. I truly believe that Georgia, as of yet, still hasn't played its best game of the season. I think there's a better performance coming from Georgia than we've seen thus far. And I say that knowing full well the fact that they looked really good in beating Tennessee at home a couple of weeks ago, and they won at Texas earlier this year. They beat Clemson 34-3. There are some very big performances that Georgia's already had, but I think the best performance of them all is still yet to come here for Georgia. And one of the ways that you could get there, one of the ways that you could unlock more of that potential in UGA is to make the running game, because guys are now healthier, a lot more formidable and a lot more a part of the offensive game plan. That it would just, create a situation where opposing defenses are just forced to guess, and oftentimes maybe forced into guessing wrong about what Georgia might be trying to do. Because if you can balance the passing attack with the running game, all of a sudden everything gets much more dangerous at that point. So will we see some of the Robinsons tonight, Rod or Branson? Will we see Trevor Etienne eventually? Who knows? But we do know we're going to see Nate Frazier. And as Frazier said to start things off here today, that he wants to be a part of the RBU legacy, that he is working on making himself into a DGD. Those are phrases that mean a lot to Georgia fans. Those are phrases that have stood out throughout history. And tonight, ahead of a rivalry game against Georgia Tech that's got its own big, prominent history, the rivalry known as clean, old-fashioned hate, we've seen these games won before because of something that a big-time Georgia running back did, putting together a big-time performance. And my guess is that Nate Frazier could be ready to kind of join that list here tonight. And Georgia on the ground, racking up yards, perhaps scoring some touchdowns, showing Tech that it's just physically tougher, physically more dominant. Kirby Smart told us this week he's ready for a street fight. Well, in a situation like that, in a game like that, I really like what Georgia can do. And I really think that Nate Frazier could be one of the dogs leading the way on getting that done here tonight. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Kroger, and we're happy that you're with us as a part of this Black Friday, day after Thanksgiving. What a strange time this is. I'm at home today. Just the honest truth is, it's like, getting into the studio, doing the show, getting back out, coming to Athens. That ends up being kind of a lot of driving, just to be completely honest. So we're not doing that today. I'm going to knock out the show here. Then I'm going to get dressed and get on over and be ready to be between the hedges with so many of you later on today, expecting an awesome atmosphere. We talked about the challenge going out to fans to make this every bit as good as it was for the Tennessee game 2 weeks ago and all the big home games of the last couple of years. This is one of those where Georgia fans need to be at their best. Tate Ratledge on social media has challenged Georgia fans to do that. My guess is that today, Georgia fans answer that call. It's very, very strange to be doing DawgNation Daily prior to a game. We've done this obviously a few times during the postseason, things like that. But we're certainly at our best here as we're looking forward to a fun one coming up later on. Of course, we appreciate our friends at Kroger who make it all possible. Whether you're watching video, radio, podcast, whatever else, it's Kroger who makes all of this happen for you here today. And we're certainly grateful for that. Many of you used Kroger to get stocked up on everything you enjoyed for Thanksgiving. And now, if you need to go get more like sandwich rolls or, a little bit of cheese to sort of put for those ham sandwich and turkey sandwiches, all that kind of stuff, those sort of like little accompaniments that make the leftovers even better. Well, today's a great way to sneak over to your local Kroger and get that done. Or last minute tailgating items as you roll into Athens. Kroger's got you on that too. And of course, the next big thing on the calendar is also Christmas. That's coming up. So you're getting ready for a great Christmas with you and your family and everybody else. Enjoy your local Kroger in-store, online at Kroger.com. You can also check out Kroger.com/holiday baking if you want to make the the cookies and the cakes and everything else, everything it needs to be for this particular season. Our folks from Kroger have got you covered on all of that. So check out Kroger as we roll through this Christmas and holiday season. Such an exciting thing to be able to do. Now, we've got Jeff Sentell coming up in a moment. That's also a really exciting thing to do. Jeff had a chance to see Talon Taylor in person last week. We'll talk about that. Georgia also got a really good commitment yesterday from Dennis Uzochukwu, the offensive lineman who at one point was committed to Georgia State, now really has impressed these Georgia Bulldogs and will be a part of this 2025 class for Georgia. We'll let Jeff tell us about Uzochukwu, and we'll also talk about, kind of what is next for some of these, open issues for UGA as the early signing period looms next week. So all of that on tap here coming up in just a couple of minutes. But prior to that, let's get ready to go around the doghouse. Today, presented by our friends at Zagoria Law. And, the truth is I do like Georgia today. And I like Georgia to get a convincing win. I think there are a lot of people who think, Tech's been nipping at Georgia's heels. And, we'll talk more about this today as a part of Go With The Flow when it airs starting at noon on the DawgNation video channels. But to Brent Key's credit, one of the things that he's been able to be really good at thus far as the Tech coach is kind of getting Tech to play at a higher level against what appears to be much better competition. And in fact, let me give you a couple of numbers here just for a moment. In the Key era, when you look at games in which Georgia Tech's been an underdog of 17 or more points, they're 5-2 against the spread, but they're also 3-4 straight up in those games. I mean, they've won 3 times outright in the Key era when they've been an underdog of 17 or more points. Obviously, that's about what the number kind of hovers at today, slightly above that. Georgia's also 0-2 against the spread in the 2 games in which they faced Tech when they've been coached by Brent Key. But prior to that, they had 4 straight, covers of the spread from 2017 through 2021, that 5-year span in which they played 4 times. So, if you listen to the Tech fans, if you listen to some of the, local media who perhaps doesn't have, a real dog in the fight, I think there's either an ambition they could keep it close, a hope on the part of some of the media this might be one of those sort of rivalry week games in which, crazy things happen. But the truth is I do think that Georgia is going to give its full focus to Tech here today. The honest, assessment of the situation is going back through the years, we don't have a lot of example of Georgia looking past Tech and looking towards the SEC championship to be caught napping. And frankly, the fact that this game this year, perhaps because it's on Black Friday night or perhaps because, all of a sudden, Brent Key's just trying to elevate the Tech program for whatever reason, I think you would join me in saying that this game is just getting more notice and attention right now than previous Georgia Tech games have gotten. So any chance that Tech might have to slip in here on the cover of darkness and sneak up on Georgia, I simply don't think that's going to happen. I think that Georgia is motivated by this game. I think that Georgia was probably unhappy. They never really admitted this, but I think they were probably unhappy that last year's game was close, single-digit margin of victory. Buster Faulkner, the offensive coordinator for Tech, the Georgia fans obviously know pretty well. He had some moments of success. And so I think that Georgia's going to be ready for this tonight. So, I like Georgia to win by 3 touchdowns or so, cover the spread. I think they're going to do that. And I think one of the reasons why, let me give you 2, in fact, here, why I think that Georgia probably gets a fairly dominant, convincing win over Georgia Tech today. Let me start with this. As I said before, I know it's going to be cold, and I know some students are kind of away and been away for Thanksgiving. One way or another, whether it's like the olds like me bundled up or the students just kind of making sure they get back in time for the game and say goodbye to their high school friends and get on that road back to Athens, whatever the formula here is, I'm expecting an atmosphere tonight where Georgia fans meet the challenge of Kirby Smart and the others who've sort of pushed for this, that's just as loud, that's just as intimidating, that's just as raucous as the great night game 2 weeks ago against Tennessee. Georgia fans have been wanting these kind of big-time night games for a long time. And now you've got, sort of a back-to-back situation here where big games for Georgia are at night at home. My guess is that Georgia's going to be more than ready to start off on all of that. And as they do, feeding off that crowd, really being fueled by the energy in the building, they'll also be working to protect a long winning streak that Georgia has between the hedges there at Dooley Field at Sanford Stadium. And this week, Kirby Smart talked about that. The need to win these games at home, the pride they take in being at their best in front of the home crowd, and the way in which that can also propel you beyond just a rivalry winning clean old-fashioned hate, but perhaps a championship too, handling your business in your own venue, a very big part of that. This is Kirby Smart from earlier this week.
Team, you got to win your home games. That's what I've always said. The best teams in Georgia win their home games. They go undefeated at home, and we got a chance to do that Friday, which they just did it too.
Yeah, so Kirby's obviously feeling really good about that. The other reason why I feel like that today I think is set up pretty well for Georgia is, you take guys from other places, and you take guys, we started the show by saying this, that not every young player has the same appreciation for history as everybody else does. But when they come here and they're a part of the program, they hear guys like Kirby, who played in this series as a player, Mike Bobo, who did the same thing, Jonas Jennings, who's a part of the Georgia program, a lot of guys who have experience in clean old-fashioned hate as a player. They'll tell them why Tech matters. They'll tell them why this game is a thing to care about. And the one thing that the Georgia coaching staff has always been really good at, and this is if you've been a coach yourself or if you just work with young people in any way, this is obviously not always the easiest thing to do. But this coaching staff has always been really good at sending the same message and allowing that message to eventually resonate to the point that eventually the players, even ones who maybe don't have the same historical context, eventually the players also start to sound like these coaches. And Georgia, by the way, it reinforces the same idea over and over again. Eventually, I think, has had an ability to kind of make the players understand what truly matters to the Georgia program, what has mattered to Georgia fans long before many of these players even got here. An example of that this week, and there are perhaps many, but one of the ones that stood out to me because I think he's a really articulate spokesman for UGA is Georgia's center, Jared Wilson, who didn't grow up with Georgia Tech as a rivalry, who doesn't feel as entrenched in this as maybe some other Georgia players do, but also because of what he's absorbed since being here, he has now grown to understand the important nature of this rivalry. And I thought that Wilson said it really well this week. Words like this, one of the reasons why I think that Georgia's set up pretty well for tonight. Here's Jared Wilson.
We have got some coaches that have played, for UGA. Coach Mike Bobo, Coach Smart. So they've played in those rivalries. They know what comes with those rivalries, and as a UGA player, you don't want to ever lose to Georgia Tech. So that's just something that they're just planting into our head. Yep.
As a UGA player, you don't ever want to lose to Georgia Tech. And you couldn't sum it up any better than that. That's what these Georgia players, even if they didn't grow up knowing very much about Tech, that is what they've all grown to understand, that Georgia's got big-time ambitions on the other side of tonight. A chance to win this SEC championship in this year. What a bragging right that would be when the league's never been deeper and Georgia's schedule's never been tougher. And depending on how that shakes out, also in position to compete for a national championship too, no matter how much the powers that be are trying to prevent that from happening. Georgia's kind of right back there in the discussion on all that as well. But you don't have any sense coming from anywhere that Georgia's looking at any of those potential trophies and any of that potential, accolade or pat on the back or anything like that. The sense that you get is the focus for Georgia is exactly where it's supposed to be on this rivalry game tonight, playing for a state championship and handling that business, because many of you as historians will tell us, Georgia's never won an SEC championship, I don't think, in a year in which they lost to Tech. Never won a national championship in a year when they lost to Tech. The best seasons for Georgia also include that win against Georgia Tech. So big month of December rolling into a big month of January, all of that could be on the way. But it starts tonight on Black Friday night, on a cold, chilly night between the hedges, needing that rivalry win against Georgia Tech. And it certainly sounds like the Dogs are ready to get that done. And that is Around the Doghouse. Speaking of dogs, presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law, the official dog bite injury lawyers of the Georgia Bulldogs. What that means is, if you or someone you love have been bitten by a dog that wasn't yours, been knocked over, injured by a dog that wasn't yours, and you don't think the owner was taking proper care, and all of a sudden now you've got pain and suffering or medical bills, things like that need to be, you feel you deserve proper compensation for because somebody wasn't taking proper care of their dog. Well, our friends at Zagoria Law want to be the one to help you with all of that. You can give them a call, 833-GA-DOG-BITE, in this case, dog spelled conventionally, DOG, 833-GA-DOGBITE. You can also go online, ZagoriaLaw.com. They literally wrote the book, and I mean literally in this case, not figuratively, but literally wrote the book on how to win these types of cases. So if you've been injured by a dog that wasn't yours, if someone you love has been injured by a dog that wasn't yours, owner wasn't taking proper care, dog got away, bit you, something like that, our friends at Zagoria Law want to help you get the compensation you deserve. So one more time, give them a call, 833-GA-DOGBITE. That's 833-GA-DOGBITE, or online, ZagoriaLaw.com. Okay, so we got a busy show. Before we're done, y'all stick with us here, especially on video. And if you're listening podcast, this might be a great way to sneak to one of those DawgNation social media channels, something like that, so you can see this. We've got an awesome, a little bit different than a normal hype video today in that we kind of took one of the things that Kirby said this week. We thought it would just be kind of funny. Kirby talked this week about, listen, how it's important not to get too emotional in a rivalry game like this. So we had a really fun time kind of pairing that with some of the things that Smart has said in the past, kind of all in good fun. So you'll like this as a part of our long drink, long finish at the end of the show. So stick with us for that. Also, final thoughts coming up on all the big rivalry games around college football here this week, including Egg Bowl later on today before Georgia gets ready to take on Tech tonight. So we'll talk about all that here coming up in just a little bit. But prior to that, a lot of UGA recruiting news. Early signing period looms here to begin the month of December. Georgia putting all the pieces in place to get ready for that. And they just got a commitment yesterday, too. So let's cover all of that right now here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, as we welcome in Jeff Sentell right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Jeff and I both broadcasting today from the friendly confines of our humble abodes. Also, both of us getting ready to make our way, bundled up as we will be, over to the Classic City here in a little bit. A little shorter drive for me than it is for Jeff, but we're both looking forward to being there. Looking forward to renewal tonight of clean, old-fashioned hay, but there is business to take care of prior to that. Recruiting news in particular here. Jeff, probably not the most surprising piece of news we'll discuss. It had been seemingly, I guess, in the works now for a while, but Dennis Uzochukwu, the offensive lineman, recently committed to Georgia State and now as a Georgia Bulldog off an official visit that he recently took there to UGA, one of those guys that seemed to really impress the Georgia coaching staff and kind of earn this opportunity. So tell us about Uzochukwu here and what he brings to the table for Georgia.
Brandon, I know you're a master of making sure you nail down all those names. So I think I'd give you an 8.9 on that landing right there. Uzochukwu. That's how he phonetically dropped it for me. But, interesting thing here, Brandon, I think we got to just tell the story of how crazy it was. He was a former basketball player. He's a first-generation American. His family is from Nigeria. Most of his older siblings and parents were born in Nigeria. Didn't start playing football, Brandon, until 10th grade. Didn't start playing offensive line till 11th grade. Didn't get his first offer until back in April. And now here he is committed to the University of Georgia. Brandon, we cover a lot of the gamut about the spectrum of the whole ifs, ands, A to Z of recruitings. We don't see a lot of stories quite like this one. Uzochukwu loves being in Athens. He actually told me he heard a pretty fiery Kirby Smart post-game speech after the UMass game where he was like, I got to play for that. I need that to make me as good as I can be. And I need that guy who's mad after a team wins 59-21 and doesn't want the music in the locker room. He has some barbed words in the locker room for players not performing at their best. That was when he knew. It wasn't just the grandeur and glory of old Georgia. He just knew he had to be a part of a college football environment like that would pull the very best football out of him. And when you got Kirby like that, and Kirby apparently was on point after UMass, that helped Georgia cinch this commitment. And
I really like it. I mean, I won't pretend to have known much about him until a couple of weeks ago, just being completely honest. But I love it when these guys earn this over the course of their senior season. And that's one of the things that I worry about with some of the changes that are on the way to college athletics. I'm like, gosh, there's so much on the horizon here where even as Georgia gets ready to try to put its roster together for 2025, they really don't know what the landscape's going to be. It's really, really crazy. But the one thing that I do like is that there is space for a guy like this to say, hey, look how I'm growing, look how I'm developing. I'm new to football, but look at my body and look how I'm using my body and recognize the potential that exists. I love the fact that guys like this can work their way onto a Georgia roster. And I love the fact that Georgia, they've been recruiting most of the 2025 guys for like the last 2 years. And Georgia typically is the kind of team that has sort of the hay in the barn by the time you get to this point in the cycle. But the fact that Georgia still leaves some space for guys who impress them, over the course of that period and at times, sometimes late in the period. I like that Georgia does that. I like that there's a space here for him in this 2025 class too.
There's two things about this story, Brandon, I want folks to know. Number one is it's kind of a modern recruit, Brandon, in the sense that he's not in a hurry to be a starter. He realizes he's raw. He realizes he needs to develop. And he's kind of goes into Georgia with the expectation from Coach Searles already laid out. They want him to be a tackle because they see his great feet. Even though he's 6'6" and 289, Brandon, he looks like he's about, 260, 265, kind of like Brandon does in one of his nice holiday sports coats. It just, makes him look so slim and trim. And the other thing is this, and I thought this was news when I talked to him and we wrote about it earlier this week. This wasn't a flip from Georgia State. He told me he verbally decommitted from Georgia State about a month ago, well before he got the Georgia offer. It was just one of those questions I guess most of the recruiting industry did not ask Dennis Uzuchukwu about. So, a lot of the graphics, a lot of the stuff out there, a lot of the stories out there said it was a flip from Georgia State. But our information, the information that came to me directly from Dennis is that he verbally decommitted to Georgia State over a month ago before this decision. The other thing is simply this, Brandon. The one point I have to double down on here is he's raw. He knows he'll take a redshirt year. Brandon, let's be honest here. Let's be mindful of the fact that this is a guy that won't be portal envious after his first season in Athens if he's not a starter or he's a co-starter on the second team.
Obviously, last week you also got a chance to see Talon Taylor play in person up in Illinois. Cold day, but Taylor had obviously a very impressive stat line, some cool highlights coming out of a playoff game up there. What was your experience of seeing, at least according to one of the services, is now a 5-star receiver for Georgia in this 2025 class? What did you make of what you saw from Talon Taylor?
Yeah, Brandon, it was pretty remarkable. It's almost like you can't wait for the ball to be thrown his way because he's going to make a play and he's going to make a guy miss. And like the feeling is like, how many yards is Talon Taylor going to get out of this time? Brandon, I don't know about you, but I don't know if I feel that way watching Georgia's receivers catch the ball this year with this team, considering that NCAA league leading drop stat, that national leading drop stat that's been floating around, Brandon. I guess I could say I was kind of like in Rocky IV mode, Brandon. I was already training for the 29-degree temps in Sanford Stadium tonight for Black Friday. I get clean old-fashioned hate against Tech by being up in Chicago and dealing with those kind of blustery winds, Brandon. Dynamic is the word. Explosive is the word. I learned a whole lot more about Talon Taylor. He's very incredibly good teammate. You see this, Brandon, right here? He makes these one-handed catches all the time. His head coach, Boone Thorgerson, told me, I said, listen, even with the great players, drops happen. I was like, when's the last time you can remember Talon Taylor dropping a ball? And he's like, silence, man. Like cricket, we had cricket sound effects with our production staff. That would be perfect right here because he can't remember the last time he dropped the ball. Brandon, this offense is so confident with Talon Taylor. They were on the half-inch line. They were on their 99.5 yards away from the goal line, and they threw the ball to Talon Taylor. They were so confident in him making plays.
Do you have a comparison? Is there? Sometimes these comparisons don't, really hold up that well anyway. But is there a comparison that you would have for kind of what you think, who Taylor reminds you of at all?
Yeah, I've kind of felt this way for a long time. I want to say maybe a faster Garrett Wilson, maybe that type of player. And I'm going to tell you, Brandon, the best way we can say that this is a viable 5-star receiver is Ohio State wanted this guy and still wants this guy, and they could take him tomorrow. One of the big chunks, Brandon, of the Talon Taylor story, and it's a good one I'm going to have to put together for DawgNation soon, is it was really odd, Brandon. we always wanted to know what the after effects of these championships were. Talon Taylor was talking to his mother when he's a freshman. They were talking about schools. They already had good interest from schools in the Big Ten country, because that's where Illinois is. And he told me, he told his mother, he said, I want to go to Georgia because Georgia wins championships. Georgia is a championship program. So they had to put themselves, his mother's a softball coach, they had to find a way to put himself in front of Georgia to be seen because he wanted to go to Georgia. I think that's a fantastic story.
Yeah, really interesting to hear about that. Obviously, we're coming up on the start of the early signing period, and Georgia trying to put the finishing touches on its class, but also trying to fight to hold on to some guys. It seems like with some of the fans over the course of the last couple of days, there's a lot of chatter online about Auburn right now, and some of this perhaps very real, some of this may be just speculative. But let's talk about Georgia and Auburn maybe battling here for a couple of recruits, at least the perception of that. First of all, Usman Kroma visits Auburn last week, running back that's been committed to Georgia now for a little while after a long time spent where Georgia probably wasn't the most dominant factor in that recruitment. This is now clearly a player Georgia wants, but Auburn swoops in. They get him on campus for an exciting win last week for the Tigers against Texas A&M. How real do you take the fact that Auburn is trying to steal Kroma away from Georgia just prior to the start of this early period?
I think it's real. If we would have to simply put like the recruiting status as a traffic stop light, you would have a red light, a caution light, and a green light. I think a yellow light is probably up right here around the Kroma recruitment, because Auburn can offer a couple things. Number one, they can offer, they can point to their current tailback, Hunter, and they can say he's a 1,000-yard rusher in the SEC and probably right now the most dynamic running back in the SEC. They can point to how they elevated his game and featured him. They can also point to the really quick path to playing at Auburn. And then there's also the NIL collective opinions there too, the collective offerings there as well. So those are three things. And, Brennan, it seems right now that Georgia, the way things might be leaning, that they might even have Trevor Etienne back for this next season, for the 2025 season. So those are a lot of things that I think that they're kind of pouring into Kroma's ear. But it's going to be interesting, Brennan. Somehow I think the Jeremiah McLeod recruitment, which Georgia is very much involved in. He took his official visit this past weekend against UMass. The Dogs are trying to flip him from Florida. And in some ways, the McLeod recruitment, because he does want to play with his high school teammate at Lee County in college, could also maybe kind of be some more anchorings, I guess, a little bit, some more structure and give some more stability to the current commitment to Usman Kroma.
Yeah, obviously both those guys, Lee County teammates together. Another defensive lineman, let's talk about Justice Terry here for a moment. And some of this stuff is sort of hard to tell if it's just, kind of hype that materializes online or, whatever. But, there's also a little bit more chatter about Auburn as a factor in Terry's recruitment coming off the visit he also took to Auburn last week. And as I said before, I really don't know what to make of this, other than just recognizing that chatter does exist. What do you make right now about the fact that, at least in the Auburn circles, they're trying to sell that visit as something that maybe gives Auburn a chance to become kind of a late player in Terry's decision before he makes it next week?
Yeah, Brendan, I kind of chalked this one. I used the parallel a minute ago of a traffic light. And I use the yellow light around Usman Kroma, although I still kind of think Usman will stay with the Dogs. I would still use a green light here with Justice Terry, because I feel like, Georgia is always been foremost in his recruitment. I think this is all kind of amounting to for Auburn and Terry. I think Auburn's making a push to try and be the silver medal finisher. That's kind of what I feel like right here. I feel like Auburn's going to talk. Auburn's going to offer a lot of things, but what Georgia can offer him, being a part of a really historic defensive line haul in Athens, is still very compelling to Justice. He told us a long while ago that he was going to make his decision on December the 6th, and he's kind of sticking to that. And I still think things are really good, good to great right here, right now with Justice Terry. And again, he's got a week, Brandon. It's kind of crazy to think about that. Although National Signing Day for the early period has gotten moved up a couple weeks, and the starting line will be on Wednesday, the finish line for Justice Terry will be on Friday.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Kind of making that decision near the end of that early period. So I guess let me use that as a way of kind of broadening this out a little bit. What else should be on a Georgia fan's radar ahead of the start of the early signing period? Are there potential surprises here? Names still yet to be added. How concerned would you be about Georgia losing? We talked about Chroma a moment ago, but losing guys that it's trying to hold on to. Give me a little bit of a snapshot about where it stands for Georgia moving into this now much earlier start to the early period.
So, Brandon, I got a good one for you. You know how when you see that Thanksgiving spread and you look around and maybe you're eyeing the fundamentals, the turkey, the ham, the dressing, the stuffings, the casserole, but you see that dessert plate over there and you're like, well, I'm going to get all this first, but I know that's what I'm going to do my work in right there. Major visitor today in Athens will be Kevin Wynn, the Greene County standout, the one who actually wants to be a chef when all things are done and open up his restaurant after his football career. He is in Athens for this first visit to a game day as a mega Georgia recruit. Georgia is trying to flip him from Florida State. He's had some flirtations with both USC and South Carolina. He's going to go visit Florida State for the Florida game on Saturday, and his decision comes next Wednesday as well. Brandon, this guy, if you add him into this Georgia defensive line class, you also would dribble in the projection I'm making here of Justice Terry. There's nobody that does this, Brandon, that could say Georgia has ever had a better defensive line haul than what Georgia could put together in that class. I think you and I have said it before, Brandon. Man, this kind of gets me a little bit excited thinking about the possibilities of that defensive line, because Greene is an absolute game wrecker. But not only that, you would have the number one DT in the class, the number two DT in the class. You would have good viable pieces like perhaps a flip of a Jeremiah McLeod or a flip of a Kevin Wynn as well. I mean, if the dream team scenario comes together for this offensive line, it's going to be like Halloween night every Saturday for the Bulldogs in the near future with their defensive front.
And of course, all of this kind of taking shape around the time in which, and I think that Kirby's talked about this some, but I don't think that I'll tell you on this show, we don't have bandwidth to probably explain all this, about just how confusing it is about, the House settlement, obviously not settled as of yet in terms of what the revenue sharing model is going to look like, what the roster limits are going to be. The SEC's obviously announced that they're going to keep their rosters capped at 85 right now, but there was some reporting from Ross Dellinger this week about, for your walk-ons, that, counting against your overall revenue. The lack of certainty about how many guys you can truly have on your team and the coming transfer portal opening up here, at a time in which Georgia's, still trying to play for a championship and still doing that. I just don't think that people properly understand just how crazy the month of December is going to be, unlike anything we've ever seen before. And at least in terms of the kind of the public understanding of this right now, no real certainty about exactly what the roster limits are, how you pay these players in an era of pay for play. It's amazing how many unresolved issues there are. And because we're in the midst of the season, and frankly, because the games are so entertaining, people have a tendency to not want to look at this. But this sport is just like one step away from like ruinous chaos. And it's amazing that it's just not quite getting very much attention right now.
Brandon, I've got a take, and it's one of the under those kind of be careful what you wish for topics. Everybody loves this playoff because it keeps more teams involved, and there's a March Madness feel to it. Here's a big difference. Football is a violent collision sport, and basketball is definitely not. So if you're playing 4 games in 2 weeks in basketball, that's fun. That's a great weekend. That's the thrill. If you play 4 games in 2 weeks, like some of these playoff roads might be, at least 3 games in 2 weeks, that's setting yourself up for, this is what I say, be careful what you wish for. Who would love to see semifinals where you got backup quarterbacks and backup running backs dominating the headlines because people can't go, because that 15th, 16th, 17th game is just going to wear out these rosters, especially, Brandon, with this talk of the walk-ons and you losing the walk-ons that help these teams practice so well to stay kind of at a razor's edge all season long, Brandon. I think one of the things you can mess with about Kirby Smart and the Georgia football program, if you want to hit him where it hurts, hit him where his practice schedule is, and that's hitting him with his walk-ons. When Georgia can't practice the way it needs to, the way it's stacked up these championships so far this decade, that's going to be a different way of doing things in Athens.
Obviously, to wrap up here, tonight's a Georgia football game on a Friday night. We're not used to that. It's also state quarterfinal action in Georgia here on Petrie Sports Network, and obviously streaming the Atlanta News First. They've got a great game on. I won't be calling it, Buford and North Gwinnett. Beyond that, though, Jeff, is there anything else in the state quarterfinals tonight that you'd be paying close attention to? Clearly, it's still a very big high school football weekend, kind of sharing some space with clean, old-fashioned hate tonight.
Yeah, it's different. I know, Brandon, you probably have your own opinion about it. I think Georgia high school football having to compete with Georgia football in this state, it's a tough sell. It's obviously going to split a lot of viewership. There are going to be some folks in the stands. There are going to be some fewer folks in the stands for these big games, maybe just aunts and uncles, moms and dads, grandma and grandpa, things like that. But the one thing, Brandon, and I guess, paint me guilty of this one, is I still have my eyes on the quarters, seeing Lee County advance and Milton advance with their respective opponents this week, because it looks like you're looking at a semifinal showdown between Lee County and Milton. And as I'm interpreting the bracket right now, Lee would go to Milton. And Brandon, I don't need to paint too hard how much that game would be anticipated in the state of Georgia. You're talking about a team that's ranked number 2 nationally in the country, picking on a Lee County team that looks like it could take on everybody in the Royal Rumble at one time right now. It looks so dominating right now, but that's what I kind of look at. And, potentially, Brandon, there could be 4 Georgia commitments in that game.
Yeah.
4 Georgia signees in that game. Let me rewind the thinking there, because when the semifinals come around, we'll be talking about Georgia's signees in these games by that time.
And by the way, not to get too deep in the weeds, but given the changes, Georgia is still going to announce signees next week. Is that right?
I think that's kind of up in the air. I think you're going to see a lot of the players announce it, or maybe the collective might announce it, or the players themselves might announce the signings. That's one of those things, Brandon, I think is to be determined about whether, those fax machines start rolling out and the UGA social media accounts start spitting out those cool graphics with the letter is in and everything is official. I think that's very much to be determined this time.
All right, Jeff, we'll see you tonight. Georgia Tech, going to be a lot of fun. Obviously, next week going to be a wild one as the Dogs put the finishing touches on their 2025 recruiting class. Happy Thanksgiving to you, and of course, a merry and jolly Christmas season too. And we'll talk to you back here very soon again on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
Brandon, the homestead looking great. Tree already up, man. I know that's not a Zoom graphic, man. That's looking sport.
Yeah, we're not quite completely done yet, but we're in process here, and we're certainly loving all of that. So I appreciate that, Jeff. Thank you very much.
No problem, man. See you tonight.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, the Christmas tree, at least in some form or fashion, kind of in the process of getting put up around me here. Christmas decorations going up all over the place. I'll tell you this, though. When it comes to what I want to see underneath the tree, I'd love nothing more than unwrap a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation here for this Christmas season. And if you want to really give somebody you love the gift that's going to just blow them away, why don't you give them that Royal Caribbean cruise vacation? If I could be so humble to suggest, how about a trip to join us on our DawgNation cruise coming up in April? This is a great time to give all of that. Utopia of the Seas is an awesome cruise ship, too. This is going to be an experience unlike any we've ever had before. We were lucky enough a year ago to be on an Oasis class ship, but this year we get to be on the brand new Oasis class ship, the newest of the Royal Caribbean cruise ships, at least until next summer when Star of the Seas comes on line for the very first time. So you want to be a part of something awesome. If you're watching on video, you saw this a moment ago, the Aqua Theater on the back of the ship. And one of the things that you really see with Royal Caribbean is the attention that they pay to like the entertainment and making that as fun as it can be. And obviously it's a kind of a first of its kind of experience to be able to have an Oasis class ship like this for those shorter cruises, the 3-night, the 4-night cruises. That's something that Royal Caribbean has really kind of introduced into the space really within the last year or so. And to now be doing that with a brand new, essentially, Oasis class ship, and the fact that our DawgNation cruise gets to be on this vessel, it is going to be just an unbelievable experience. So we'd love to have you there. As I said, you want to give that to somebody for Christmas, you want to ask for that for yourself for Christmas, that's an awesome experience. So give Jessica Slater a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. She's got the hookup that you need for the great experience on any of the Royal Caribbean cruise ships, on any of the itineraries for 2025, but also as a part of our DawgNation cruise there in April. Sailing out of Port Canaveral, going to Nassau in the Bahamas, going to Perfect Day, Coco Cay, and having a wonderful experience with that. All right, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean right now. And I kind of want to give you a few thoughts on rivalry week games. First of all, last night, not quite a rivalry game, but certainly interesting. You saw Memphis go into New Orleans, take care of business against Tulane. Memphis was a little bit of a live dog here, kind of had that appearance. And, now I think it sets up a situation where, you could have UNLV and Boise in the championship game next week, assuming both teams win this weekend, and kind of a win and you're in for that college football playoff spot. This loss for Tulane probably eliminates them from consideration. Army getting blown out by Notre Dame last week probably eliminates it from consideration. So it kind of comes down to a Boise versus UNLV, it would appear, in next week's Mountain West championship game. One of those teams will go to the college football playoff. And I do think that Boise State, depending on who wins the Big 12, still has a little bit of a pathway to be one of the top 4 seeds, surpassing the Big 12 champion and getting that bye. That could be out there. But a Tulane team who had been a little bit of a darling the last few weeks, really kind of just, Memphis really the better team from the word go last night. So the Memphis upset of Tulane opens the door for either Boise or UNLV. And if it's Boise, perhaps opening the door for them to get one of the top 4 seeds. So keep your eyes on that. As far as today goes, a general theme for me on the weekend, I think the favored team that have playoff hopes in a lot of these rivalry games, I think for the most part, most of those teams are going to play well. If we see any underdog kind of, shock the world type mentality today, this weekend, I would at least keep my eye on Mississippi State a little bit. That number at last check was 26.5. I don't know that the Bulldogs are good enough to win because, frankly, I don't know that Mississippi State's good enough to beat anybody. This is obviously one of the worst SEC teams we've seen in a little while. But, Ole Miss lost last week to Florida. Their playoff hopes are pretty faint right now. Their losses, all 3, come to unranked teams. So, the win they have head-to-head against South Carolina, I don't know how well that's going to hold up, just given who their losses have been to. I think there may be a sense in Oxford that a season that had so much promise may be coming to an end. If it is, this is one of those spots where all these transfer players, big dollar, NIL type deals, do you think they give a rip about the Egg Bowl? The folks in the state of Mississippi obviously live and die with this game, but most of these transfers are not from Mississippi. I think there's a chance that Ole Miss is just, maybe they win because, Mississippi State's just that bad. But in terms of coming out and dominating the way that the line projects them to, I sort of think the Bulldogs could be worth a look as the underdog here today in that Egg Bowl. It's 3:30 start, kind of rolling you right into clean old-fashioned hay. And then quickly, other than that, let's look at the Saturday slate here for a moment. We'll give you our official pick on South Carolina and Clemson coming up as part of our R.S. Andrews cool down in a bit. I love Ohio State to dominate Michigan. Michigan's actually played better as of late. They began the year 1-6 against the spread, but they're 3-1 in their last 4 against the number. So, they had the close game against Indiana. You'll remember that. But the truth is, for a lot of the things that Ohio State wants to do, win a championship, all that kind of stuff, the one thing they have to do is they have to beat Michigan. Buckeyes have not beaten the Wolverines since 2019. Didn't play in 2020. Michigan's obviously won the last 3. This is the kind of game where if Ohio State were to lose it, without hyperbole, I can tell you, I believe that Ryan Day would get fired. You have to beat Michigan. They're fired up for this. It's been a kind of a lost year in a post-national championship run for a new coach, Jerome Moore. Michigan's not really on many of our radars. I can promise you, for Ohio State, its fans, and certainly Ryan Day and this coaching staff, Wolverines still very much on their radar. I believe that Ohio State is going to be hungry for not just a win, a very convincing win as a way of kind of getting some of the pressure off their back after playing so poorly against Michigan in the past. I love Ohio State here in this spot on Saturday. I also like Alabama in the Iron Bowl against Auburn. History would suggest that Auburn has a way of keeping it close with Alabama. Even very good Nick Saban coach teams, only one game in the last 3 years for Alabama against Auburn has been decided by more than a field goal. Just twice in the last 5 years that Auburn just has a history of keeping it close. They won outright in 2019, 2017, 2013. Auburn under sometimes Gus Malzahn, a little bit of Brian Harsin, and even last year with Hugh Freeze, they just kind of find a way to sometimes keep it close against Alabama. Don't think that's the case, here Saturday. I do believe that Alabama, obviously, kind of looks at some faint playoff hope still alive. That's perhaps a motivating force. And for Kalen DeBoer, his quality of life would just be so diminished if they mess around with Auburn after suffering their third loss last week. I think this is an Alabama team playing at home that has a chance to be kind of ready for Auburn. I like Alabama to cover the 11.5 right there. I also, from a similar point spread standpoint, like Tennessee at Vanderbilt. In the Josh Heupel era, Vandy has not snuck up on Tennessee very much. They've only covered the spread once in the 3 years, but they've all been 20-plus point. The 2022 games, 56-0. This is a Tennessee team, for the most part, that's handled business against Vanderbilt. Tennessee obviously knows it has to play well for its chance at the college football playoff. This is essentially a play-in game for them. I don't think you get a sleepy Tennessee in that spot. I don't think the Vols look past. This is a Tennessee team that's still got a pretty good defense. Vanderbilt, in its own right, is a pretty good team. I think Tennessee's ready for this. I'll like them to cover the spread in that spot on the road. And in the biggest game in the regular season, I think in quite some time, I think this is a huge game. Texas and Texas A&M renewing their rivalry for the first time since 2011, with a spot in the SEC championship up for grabs, with playoff spots kind of up for grabs in a roundabout way there too. I think this is just a gigantic game, and I'm going to be rooting hard for Texas A&M here. I don't like Texas. I think they've been gifted a very easy schedule, and they've kind of feasted on that for the most part. I'd love for them to be exposed against the Aggies. There are, though, two games for me in this that really come to the forefront of my mind that kind of shape my opinion on this. In the case of Texas, it's the fact that last year they go on the road, similar team, maybe not quite as good up front defensively, but similar team overall, and really handle business in a hostile road environment last year against Alabama. That taught me a little something about Texas. In other words, they may have an easy schedule and they may be inflated somewhat by that, but it doesn't mean they're not a quality football team. I still think Texas is probably a quality football team, and winning at Alabama last year is certainly proof of a fairly mature program. On the flip side, there's a lot to like about A&M. I think that Mike Elko's had a very successful first year there, but there's also, let's go back to the beginning of the season, another wild environment. Anytime Notre Dame comes into your stadium, there's some extra juice around that. Georgia fans can attest to that going back to 2019. Well, on that particular day, A&M, they lost by 10 points at home to Notre Dame. They did not stand up behind that big crowd in the season opener against the Fighting Irish. And, one result doesn't prove anything about today, but I can't quite shake that when you think about all of this. Texas is 3-4 against the spread as a road favorite going back to 23 and 24 the last two seasons. So they're about, almost 500 in terms of covering the number in that situation. As much as it pains me to admit, I do believe that Texas goes on the road, wins that game by about a touchdown or so, setting up a rematch with Georgia in the SEC championship and disappointing a bunch of Aggies fans who do not want Texas in the SEC and are so hungry for the chance to slap them down. As much as I'd love to see Gig'em win this one, I sort of think Texas is the right side here. We'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, we've got a really great way to kind of set the mood right for the game against Tech coming up here in a moment on DawgNation Daily. We'll look forward to doing that here in a little bit. But prior to that, this is, in addition to being a regular work day for us, is also a game day as well. And of course, game days around here, you've gotten used to hearing us talk a lot about Laster Tractor. I love my folks down there at Laster Tractor. Of course, they got locations all across the state of Georgia. We had a great lunch today with Will and Kaylee from Laster. Just really, really good people. Awesome awesome. They're serving the needs of folks in our area and across our state when it comes to those compact utility tractors for people with, large ag, small ag, kind of everything in between. You want a Series 1 tractor. If you've got like less than 5 acres, that may be a good way for you to help take care of that land with one of those Series 1 tractors. Of course, this is South Georgia's hometown John Deere dealer, so you're working with the most recognizable brand of them all when it comes to stuff like that. Laster Tractor's been serving folks with these John Deere tractors since 1956. You could even get as big as like the Series 4 tractor. It's the king of compacts. It's got the most horsepower of all of those John Deere compact utility tractors. So if you've got a bigger piece of land, you want to do that, the Series 4 tractor could be an example of that for you. The point here is whatever the size of your lot is, whatever land you're looking to take care of, one of those great John Deere compact utility tractors from Laster Tractor is a perfect fit for you. They can also customize it with you with the loader bucket, the rotary cutter, and all that kind of stuff too, to help you get that job done. These are good people, in Moultrie and places all across the state of Georgia, taking care of you when it comes to your John Deere tractor needs. And they've been doing that in South Georgia since 1956. I want you to find them online. It's LassiterEQ.com. That's LASSETER, Lassiter EQ. Make sure you check that out today. And as we get ready to wrap up Friday here and get you ready for the game tonight, it was a very funny moment from Kirby Smart earlier this week when Kirby talked about the emotions of a rivalry game and why it's important to recognize the emotion, but perhaps not be moved too much by that emotion. It kind of reminded us of some of the things that Kirby Smart has done in the past, perhaps not always, maybe taking his own advice. This is just really funny. It's our long finish here presented by the Finish Long Drink. A great way to look at kind of how sometimes the public words of the very stately coach and the private words, when you're really tasked with getting your team fired up, it's not exactly always the same thing. This is good stuff here this week as part of our long finish presented by the Finish Long Drink.
Rivalry and emotions, feelings for this game.
Yeah, I don't think you get real emotional.
All I want to do is eat. I want you to eat. I want you to eat. I want you to want this. Do you want it? Do you want it? Show me.
You're a lot better, Coach, when you stay composed.
Go out here and that up. When I sat in that meeting, I wanted to go play right then. Do your out here. Do your up.
It will be an emotional game, but I don't get emotional about it.
Physically, I want to break them. I'm talking about break these on defense and offense.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate y'all.
I think that's so funny. And I thought our buddy Cody Chafins did such a great job with that. He and I kind of talked about that kind of plan for that video. It's just kind of funny because what you do, and when you speak to the reporters, when you kind of represent the program as the face of the organization, there's a certain need to be senatorial, to be, kind of stately and, buttoned up. That's what a leader of an organization does. But when you're also getting ready to lead men into what Kirby Smart described this week as a street fight, you don't always necessarily talk that way privately. Privately, you've got to do whatever it takes to get guys ready to go. And Kirby Smart is very good at kind of adopting both those personas, whichever one he needs in a given moment. So we had some fun with that as a part of our long drink, long finish. And speaking of the Finish Long Drink, listen, it's cold outside. We understand that, but it's still a great day for a great tailgate. The fact of the matter is, the long drink comes from Finland. People have been drinking this stuff in the cold for a million years. So get out there, get ready to enjoy a great one here today and make the Finish Long Drink a big part of your tailgate experience. I don't know how many folks are playing golf, but as you see, when we were over at the Iron Horse Golf Club a couple of months ago, we had an awesome time with the Finish Long Drink that day playing golf. It's just a wonderful experience, whether you're tailgating, playing golf, having that sort of last minute kind of holiday thing lingering with the Thanksgiving. Maybe you're getting around the outdoor campfire tonight or something like that. Whatever that is, the Finish Long Drink is great for that. The peach flavored version here in the Peach State, the Long Drink Zero, no carbs, no sugar. The Long Drink Strong, 8.5% alcohol by volume. My favorite, the traditional citrus in the blue can with the grapefruit flavor, the gin kick. My wife loves the cranberry. Whatever you like, there is a Finish Long Drink variety for you. So find them online, thelongdrink.com, for a lot more on that. And as we wrap up here on this Friday, obviously we'll give out some golden shoes for today. One thing you'll notice in these golden shoes, you no longer see the free Eddie graphic at the bottom of this because we found out on Wednesday's show that Eddie is returning. We got a January return date from Eddie, so we'll be giving you more information about that, what he has to say when he comes back. We'll find out more about that as we get close for all of that. But we got a great collection of golden shoes to give out here today. Texas Dog shared this, and I really like this. I think this a couple different places, and I think this is an analogy that really works. He says, it's easy to look sharp when you haven't done any work. Strength of schedule ranked first. And what you see is the Georgia pencil over here, very obviously been used a lot of hard work done with that. The Big Ten, the ACC, the Mountain West, the Big 12, the Independents, all the rest of them, they have a sharp pencil because they haven't been doing very much. That's the kind of graphic that the committee could probably make some sense of, or at least they probably need to. So I thought everybody Texas Dog did a great job with that. We'll give him a golden shoe for that. Also, another golden shoe going out here to John Adams. He calls himself Dog Speed on the X platform. He says when you make Georgia your Super Bowl, then you don't respect the entire journey to get to your goals. In other words, Ole Miss handled Georgia, did a great job there. Alabama, kind of the same type of deal, but all of a sudden now locked out of the SEC championship, and Georgia's playing on because of its focus. I think that's a really smart graphic and well done there by Dog Speed. We'll give him a golden shoe for that. And then finally, our last golden shoe for the week going out to our buddy Georgia on Tap, who says, it's hate week, DawgNation Daily. Get your mind right. And you see the classic Mad Men meme here of Brent Key talking about how much he hates Georgia. And Kirby Smart, in kind of the Don Draper role here, says, I don't think about you at all. And clearly that's what tonight's all about. Tech wants to be nipping at Georgia's heels. Tech wants Georgia's attention. Unfortunately, tonight you may find out what it feels like to actually have UGA's attention. You might not be quite so happy out of that after that. So great golden shoes here today. How about another Georgia rivalry for a moment? Lousy, stinking Gators, our Gator hater updater. Now been 1,483 days since the lousy, stinking Gators have beaten the Georgia Bulldogs. You always love all of that. Y'all, happy Thanksgiving. As Georgia on Tap said, get your mind right. Be ready to get your face in the place. Sanford Stadium here tonight. Unbelievable atmosphere. Let's beat up on Georgia Tech. Let's win clean old-fashioned hate, and let's get ready for everything that comes up after that right here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust them on all of that. I gave you some official picks for some of our other games a moment ago. We'll do more of this on our Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, a bit later on in the day-to-day airs starting at noon on the DawgNation video channels. And we'll give you an official pick on South Carolina Clemson. Another one of these games I think is awesome. In fact, can we say, and hopefully Georgia plays well enough to make this, a true thing, that the most interesting rivalry game of the weekend, I believe, is obviously Texas A&M. I think that's the most interesting game. Can we say, and are we in agreement that the next most interesting game is Clemson, South Carolina? Both these teams in some form or fashion have just a little bit of a playoff hope here. Clemson wants to win the ACC. South Carolina wants to be the best of the three lost teams. I think it's a really good game tomorrow. I really do. So we'll give you an official pick on that coming up. So let me do this. Let me take a couple of swings around the comment section here for right now. We'll do the pick for Clemson, South Carolina, our kind of preview of Go With The Flow, and then I'll come back on the other side and wrap up today's show. Jim Blair also reminding me that when I do the announcement of, and other people have pointed this out, it sounds better when I say it all the way out, all the syllables, 1,000, whatever that is. That is certainly true. Joseph Kennedy says that Bama fans right now are crying over the tail kicking they received against Oklahoma. Yeah, they're not happy. And Kalen DeBoer may find out just how unhappy they are if he doesn't play much better against Auburn. He's probably already feeling some of that, and he may feel a lot more. He may feel a lot more here in the very near future. Let's see what else. Let me go to DawgNation.com for a minute, and we'll kind of hit some comments up over here and kind of see what what kind of mood everybody is in. I'm looking at like Facebook, YouTube, Twitter on my laptop today. It's kind of all in this format. It kind of all combines them. DawgNation.com is separate, so I'll pop over here and get a few of these over here, and we will see what is going on with everybody. And I hope, as I said before, you're getting ready for a fun one here tonight. Philip Jordan Wells says, bark loud, be proud. Yeah, a lot of Georgia fans certainly hoping to do that. Let's see what else. SEM Dog shouting out Jared Wilson. You love that. DT says that Boise State's playing at 9 a.m. local time. That's wild. That's wild. Yeah, that's obviously awful early. We had Colorado playing at like 10 a.m. the other day. And Adrian Carver says Sanford City needs to crank up the coffee. He says no beer for mama. You got a hot beverages to fuel the fire tonight. Yeah, a lot of folks going to do whatever they can to stay warm tonight for sure. That is indeed the case. Indeed, that is the case for sure. Jason Jackson says respect your opponent. That's how upsets happen. Go Dogs. Listen, I don't think there's any chance that Georgia is anything other than fully focused tonight. In fact, I think the Tech may find out how unpleasant it is to get the full focus from Georgia. There's a weird thing where if you look at, I mean, you can do the math on this yourself. Look at non-conference games for Georgia, and you kind of put them into three categories. You have like the sort of group of 5 FCS category. You have Georgia Tech, and you have like ranked non-conference opponents. Here's one of the things you'll see is Georgia historically almost beats the ranked non-conference opponents worse than it beats a team like Tech. You know, last year Tech kept it single digits against Georgia. I mean, since 2021, no ranked non-conference opponent other than Ohio State has kept it single digits with Georgia, right? That you know, if Georgia sort of sees the non-conference team that's good enough to get its full attention, it's 34-3 against Clemson, it's 49-3 against Oregon, it's blowout against Michigan in the Orange Bowl. You know, there's just, you know, there's a level of focus that Georgia seems to have for some of these bigger games. And I think tonight Tech, because of some of what it said, because of the fact that the game was close last year, or at least close-ish, because it's on Black Friday night. I mean, my thought is that Tech might be in the unenviable position of getting Georgia's full attention tonight. If I had to guess, that's where I think it's going, for sure. All right, let's see what else is going on over here. DT enjoyed the video from Cody. Cody did a great job on that. Really thought that was very funny. Very well done indeed. All right, we're going to get ready to get some more comments, say goodbye to you here in a moment. But prior to that, as we said, big game taking place between Clemson and South Carolina on Saturday. So as a part of our R.S. Andrews cool down, let's give you a taste of Go With The Flow. Official pick for South Carolina Clemson. Best bets from kind of beyond all of that. And then I'll come back here to wrap it up after that. So here's a taste of the R.S. Andrews Go With The Flow as a part of the R.S. Andrews cool down. Final thoughts on some other big games for the weekend. Take a look at this. Hello, DawgNation Daily and R.S. Andrews cool down viewers. Welcome into this little taste of Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Andrews. Of course, this week you're getting plenty of taste of all kinds of things, and hopefully this will be as good for you as so much of that Thanksgiving food and those great Thanksgiving leftovers perhaps have been. Of course, there are plenty of leftover picks for us, too, if you'll check out Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, starting at noon. That's when it airs for the first time on the DawgNation video channels, and it's on demand anytime for you after that, here on this game day or anytime. If you want to get thoughts rolling into Saturday, we will give you all of that. And as a taste of what that sounds like, how about a pick here in the big battle in the Palmetto State as South Carolina travels to Clemson? Of course, Clemson gets brand new, fresh playoff hopes here after being ranked at number 12 by the committee this past week, trying to still win the ACC, but also maybe an outside chance of being an at-large recipient of a playoff bid if the thing's going to fall in their way. And, of course, on the other side, South Carolina in very much the same situation, playing as good a brand of football as any team in the country over the last month plus, but also probably need some help, too, after 3 losses earlier in the season. They're ranked 15th here this week, but maybe looking for a door to open to kind of move up and maybe get one of those at-large spots. There's also plenty at stake in this game in its own right, one of the great rivalries here in the South and one of many SEC versus ACC rivalries that our part of the country kind of hangs its hat on. So South Carolina goes to Clemson. Clemson at home sees itself as a 2.5-point favorite. Mike Griffith, what do you want to do here with this really fun rivalry game?
Yeah, my gut's telling me Clemson, but my brain's telling me South Carolina. I'm kind of going back and forth on this one, Brandon. I mean, the Gamecocks have been playing really good football. Clemson's got something big within their grasp, I feel. I think Dabo Swinney's a really good football coach, but when I look at the actual matchup, South Carolina has a really good pass rush, and I feel like that's how Georgia affected Clemson. So give me the Gamecocks on the road. They've been feisty this year.
Mike takes the Gamecocks plus 2.5. Jeff Sentell, what about you?
Yeah, guys, the road trip theme that Mike kind of mentions there kind of catches in my mind. It's going to be kind of, I think of my childhood a little bit, and those roadblocks for the General Lee as they try to keep them out of Hazard County. And the roadblock this time is the South Carolina defense, especially their defensive line. Although the Tigers might be clad in orange, they're not going to be able to jump over this roadblock. South Carolina is just too tough up front. I think Beamer and his boys are going to have a lot of stuff to make some new TikTok videos about, some new viral videos about, because taking down Clemson in Clemson as a underdog is going to be real big. I think the number's 2.5. I think the Gamecocks will win by at least a touchdown, and they will get out of town like they stole something.
So, Jeff, also on the side of South Carolina, Connor Riley, how about a pre-submitted pick for you? What do you think of South Carolina on the road here?
No team in the country is playing better than South Carolina right now. I think if you were ranking the actual 12 best teams on what we've seen and throughout the records, as you're supposed to do in these rivalry games, I think South Carolina would be one of the top 12 teams. But there's just something about them that I can't fully trust. I think this Clemson defense is going to make things difficult for Lenoris Sellers, and I think he's going to find a way to struggle a little bit in this game. But this South Carolina defensive line is really good. I was really alarmed by what I saw from Clemson in that Pitt game 2 weeks ago, especially in the second half there, where they needed a miracle 50-yard touchdown run from Cade Klubnik to win that game against Pitt. While it probably behooved Georgia greatly if Clemson were to find a way to win this game and keep their playoff hopes alive, I'm going to take South Carolina here plus the 2.5 points and think that Shane Beamer's team is going to really build something special. Probably not good enough to get into the college football playoff just because of the combination of losses that they have, but really an all-around strong season for the South Carolina Gamecocks.
Connor gave us a little bit of a plot twist there. I thought he was heading towards a Clemson pick and then swerved back in the direction of South Carolina before it was over. So once again, Kaylee, we come to you with a clean sweep here thus far. Gamecocks getting a lot of love, plus 2.5 in Death Valley. Are you in on that too?
Perhaps my favorite thing about this entire show is that with Connor's tape things, him and Mike have the exact same picks. I feel a personal small victory in that. Congratulations to both of you. Because with no Connor, there's no fading picks. But I'm going to agree with the panel. I think that South Carolina has shifted into another gear and picked up a whole new level of speed. I think they're the hottest team in the SEC. They actually have the longest win streak of any SEC team. They haven't lost a game since October 12th. And I think that they want their destiny to be within their control, because if they lose to Clemson, okay, well, then they know it's over and there's nothing that they can do about it. But if they do have that win against them, then at that point it's up to the committee, and it can't be because they lost. So I love South Carolina in this game. I'm going to go with the Gamecocks.
So, boy, it's been amazing how much, I guess, agreement there is here today. I'm in on this, too. I also like South Carolina. For me, it comes down to a simple thing. This has been a great defense all year long, but, boy, this Gamecock offense has really come together as of late. They've won 5 straight games, but let's throw out the Wofford game last week and look at just the 4 straight SEC games that South Carolina won over that span, and the play of the quarterback Lenoris Sellers, I should say. Sellers over the course of that time, 10 touchdown passes. He also rushed for a touchdown, a combined total of 1,227 yards, both through the air and the ground. He's playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the country so far in the month of November. And honestly, if we had a true tournament where you just throw them all out there are a lot of teams that are almost certainly going to be in the playoff that I would absolutely take South Carolina to beat, including Clemson here in this spot. So I like the Gamecocks plus 2.5. I don't know if they make the playoff. I do think they could. I don't know that they will, but if they were in there, that's a pretty dangerous football team, and I believe Clemson finds that out on Saturday. So, once again, a lot of this today, Dari, clean sweep. You want to go with the flow and take South Carolina.
As good as South Carolina's been over this past almost 2 months, this is where they run out of gas. They're done. They're going into Death Valley, and it's going to be wheels spinning in mud. They're not going to be able to keep up with Clemson. I think Clemson knows what's in front of them, and they're going to handle business to ensure that they try to get one of those last playoff spots available.
So Dari getting a chance to be on the other side of folks here and perhaps moving up those standings if he is right, which he very well could be. So that's the story with all our official picks. Of course, the other 5 coming as a part of Go With The Flow, which airs later on today on the DawgNation video channels. Now we'll kind of broaden things out on a very fun rivalry weekend with big games on Friday, which is when you're watching this, and also on Saturday as well. So Mike Griffith, I come back to you. Anything else from rivalry weekend that you would like to highlight here from a best bet standpoint?
Yeah, I'm going to take Louisville, and I'm going to give 3.5 points to Kentucky. Kentucky seems like they've lost their grip a little bit. And Boise State's laying 19 points against Oregon State, against the Pac-12, one of the 2 Pac-12 teams. Give me Oregon State in the 19.5. Those are my best bets.
I like the Louisville pick. The Oregon State boys, I don't have much of an opinion on, but I do like Louisville going to that game against Kentucky. I think the Wildcats are in kind of a weird spot right now. That could be a pretty sharp play. Jeff Sentell, what about for you?
Yeah, guys, I'm going to take the biggest traffic jam pick that we haven't discussed amongst this esteemed panel. It's another top 25 matchup. It's Iowa State versus Kansas State. Guys, DJ Giddens at Kansas State is rolling right now. Rolling. I think he's over 140 yards, 10 yards per carry. Back-to-back weeks, I think the line is only like 1.5, 2 points I'm seeing right now. Iowa State's got the favorite. Give me Kansas State. I think they're going to win that football game. They're going to have a good time doing it. Big win there.
We love rivalry games with cool nicknames, and that's one of the best. Farmageddon. Jeff weighing in on a pick there. That is good stuff. Let's go to Connor. Some pre-recorded best bet picks from him. Connor, what you got?
Yeah, we're coming off a big 2-0 week. Jeff doubted our Arizona State Sun Devils last week, but they nervously found a way to get home with a cover in that win over BYU, and then we gave out Vanderbilt, as we mentioned earlier. 2 more picks for you this week. We're going to go back to the Big 12. I like Kansas State plus 2.5 against Iowa State here. Kansas State team still trying to potentially play their way into the Big 12 title game. Iowa State wins and in if that is the scenario, but I don't think they're going to win this game. I like this Kansas State team. Haven't had the season that they wanted to, but I very much subscribe to BA's underdog theory in the Big 12, and so I like Kansas State to get home with a win this week over the Cyclones. And then the other game, and look, I've been burned by this situation before. It's a hold on to your butts ticket. Give me Syracuse plus 11 against Miami. It's a game where, look, Miami can erase that deficit really quickly, but I haven't been very impressed with this Miami team over the course of the season. Even last week against Wake Forest, I know if you look at the box score, you'll see the final score was 42-14, but with 8 minutes left in that game, that was a 20-14 game. Syracuse is probably a paper-thin 8-3 football team, but I like for Fran Brown's team to at least go out there, get it done, and at least get a cover. I don't know that Miami is going to go out there and blow them out from the jump over 60 minutes. And you might be sweating late in this game, as Miami has been known to try and pile things on. But give me Syracuse at home in what was the Carrier Dome, what I will continue to call the Carrier Dome, at plus 11, and then give me Kansas State plus 2.5. Those are my best bets for the final week of the regular season.
And, of course, happy Thanksgiving to Connor as he enjoys some of that time. We'll see him, obviously, tonight at Sanford Stadium for Georgia and Georgia Tech. Kaylee Manziel, how about some best bets from you?
Kind of a weird one, and I actually pulled this from the college football playoff rankings last night. Maybe one of the only good takeaways from that whole scenario. But this week, Tulane is a 13.5-point favorite over Memphis at home. I don't know how many people are going to go home from Tulane. I think a lot of people will be at this game. But here's the thing. If Boise State were to get upset in their conference championship, then Tulane would be the next highest ranked group of 5 team and would go in and snag that spot. So I think style points are really, really big here for Tulane. So I like Tulane as a 13.5-point home favorite over Memphis.
Be really careful. That's a pretty good Memphis football team. Be really, really careful with that.
They're good. They're like 2-5 against the spread in their last 7 games.
Be really careful. That's a pretty good football team. We'll see. But interesting pick there from Kaylee. And she's right. Tulane right now vying to be that top group of 5 teams. So clearly a lot at stake for that one against the Tigers. For me, as Connor mentioned, 2-0 last week. I also 2-0. He and I were together on Vanderbilt plus the points at LSU. We got home on that. I also had Louisiana Tech earning a cover against Arkansas, so that felt pretty good here too. This week I got 3 picks. Now, A moment ago, you heard me kind of roll through, or at least you've been watching. If you'll watch Go with the Flow, you'll see all of this. You heard me a lot on favorites in these rivalry games. Now, there is no chance we get through the entire rivalry weekend without something crazy happening somewhere. So if it's not the biggest games, then where is it? May I submit the Egg Bowl here for you, where on Friday afternoon, just a little bit later on today, Ole Miss is going to be playing as a 26.5-point home favorite against Mississippi State, fresh off an ugly loss last week to Florida that, at least in theory, has probably ruined Ole Miss's chance of being in the college football playoff. So that very expensive roster of players bought from other programs out of state, do you think they give a rip about the Egg Bowl and that very, very intense but somewhat provincial rivalry between Ole Miss and Mississippi State? My suggestion is they probably don't care at all. Now, Mississippi State's not very good, so I'd be surprised, I guess, if they were to win the game. But 26.5 points is a ton. Jeff Lebby could certainly play this game somewhat close and give his team some momentum going into the offseason and perhaps a little bit better quality of life in his first, full offseason as the Mississippi State coach here. So I like the Egg Bowl to be at least crazy enough to get the Bulldogs plus the 26.5. I'll give you that. Connor mentioned a theory that I've used a lot this year, which is Big 12 underdogs, sort of a blanket take, and hope to get about 60% of those right. Another theory that's worked for me a lot is the idea of an interim coach, that some of these teams, even in moments when it seems inexplicable, interim coaches have led their teams to pretty impressive performances. However, there's also a situation this week where a team is choosing not to use an interim coach. Mac Brown is out as UNC coach, but he's still going to coach in the in-state rivalry game against NC State on Saturday. That means the boost you could get from the fresh blood in the coach's spot, you don't get that here. I don't think this team likes playing for Mac Brown very much. There's been several examples of that here this year. So I think this entire team is thinking about where they'll be a week from now, where they'll be a year from now. I like NC State plus the 3.5 against North Carolina. And just for fun, because perhaps it's the last time I'll get a chance to do this, give me Arkansas plus 3.5 at Missouri. In the Pittman era, for as good as he's been against the spread, that has often not come against Missouri. Eli Drinkwitz sort of had his number a little bit there. Honestly, compels me to admit. But just for fun, I'm going to take Arkansas plus the 3.5 to maybe, just maybe, give Sam Pittman a very emotional lift here in this end of the season. So I'll take Arkansas plus 3.5, Mississippi State plus 26.5, and I'll take NC State plus 3.5. Dari Payro, about some best bets for you.
Yeah, so last week, my only win I had was clearly choosing Notre Dame to cover that spread against Army. But I'm going to break out the jumper cables and hook it up to Army's offensive engine, and I think they're going to get that thing rolling. I think they're going to easily cover the 7 points against UTSA. That's my best bet of the week. I also like the points taking Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. I think that's just way too many points in that game.
What about your East Carolina Pirates against Navy? Are you not on that?
Man, I want to take ECU. They just, extended the interim head coach as the head coach, giving him that job because they've done so well. Historically against Army or Navy, ECU never covers. I think it's like maybe a 10% chance. I'm hoping ECU wins a game. It's a pick 'em. But if you're gonna bet on it, I'd probably take Navy, just because historically we just don't cover against the armed forces teams.
Fair enough. Dari, great stuff from you and great stuff from our entire panel, too. In fact, you want to see all that great stuff, check out Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, debuting today at noon and available for you all weekend long, even after the game tonight for Georgia and Georgia Tech. A lot of thoughts on the other big rivalry game weekends. I hope you'll check that out, and we'll look forward to getting you back now to the R.S. Andrews Cooldown here on DawgNation Daily.
So really good stuff. And don't forget, coming up at noon today, that's when it airs for the very first time, you'll see the rest of Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, the official pick on Georgia versus Georgia Tech, all the other big games. You can see that there, and after that, kind of roll into a regular old game day. Coming up 5:30 this evening, Kaylee Manziel will have you from Jittery Joe's downtown for the DawgNation Game Day pregame show. I'll see you tonight for the DawgNation postgame show as Georgia tries to keep its home winning streak alive, get another win against clean old-fashioned hate, and wrap up the regular season on a high note. As I've been saying throughout the day, I think these Dogs are ready for Tech tonight. I think this is going to be a big win for UGA, and I think it sets up for what could be an incredibly fun run through the month of December and January. I hope you all had a very happy Thanksgiving. We appreciate you so much spending your Thanksgiving week for us. And if you're normally at work and have gotten a chance to watch the show live here this week when you don't typically get to, well, we're glad to have you checking in this way for a change. And obviously, we always appreciate all of you, about 90-something% of you, end up watching the show after it airs live. And so we're just thankful that whenever it works for you, we're here for you. And of course, it's great sponsors like our friends at RS Andrews that allow us to do that. And speaking of RS Andrews, they bring the RS Andrews cool down to you each and every day. And of course, as we get ready to endure some very cold weather, don't forget, if you want your heating system to kind of withstand all of the cold weather that's on its way, get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs with our friends at RS Andrews. You can find them online, rsandrews.com. Old furnace that may eventually need to be replaced. Before that has to be done, how about doing what you can do to get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs? Our friends at RS Andrews will help you do that. It may only cost you $99. So check them out for that. Plumbing emergencies, things of that nature. RS Andrews got you covered. Once again, online, rsandrews.com. So enjoy your Black Friday. Get over to Athens if you're going. Get ready to tune in if you're not. We'll see you for the DawgNation Game Day pregame show. We'll see you from the UGA bookstore for our DawgNation postgame show. Let's enjoy Georgia get this rivalry win against the Yellow Jackets today as a part of clean, old-fashioned hate. And I'll see you back here Monday from the studio, normal situation at that time for DawgNation Daily presented by